I really like these pre-made bases that Corvus Belli put out, but I think we could spice them up a little bit. What's up everybody, Jeff here, and I'm a big fan of making bases, but I've always struggled with making bases for sci-fi games. Natural bases you can be pretty sloppy, fast and loose. It actually kind of makes them look better in many cases, but when you're talking about like a spaceship deck or the inside of some sort of military base, things have to be a little bit straighter and a little bit neater to look real. Now, I made a video in the past where I tried to recreate the Aleph bases that Corvus Belli uses in some of their studio models, and I think they came out pretty good, but it's a ton of work and it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. Check that video out if you want to put some of those together for yourself, but this is why I think it's really cool that Corvus Belli started putting out their own little pre-made bases. Now, I call them bases and not base toppers because these do fully replace the base that you would get with the particular model. They even have the little line of sight markers in the front-facing arc, which is really cool. And they've been rolling these things out over the last couple of years, and there's quite a few different varieties at this point. Now, these are cool, and I definitely like them. I've been using them for my Corregidor models, but there's one problem that I've run into with them, and that is that there are only 5 different variants for the small bases. I don't know about you, but when I get all of my models together, if all the bases look pretty much the same, it kind of takes away a little bit of the cool factor, a little bit of the immersion for me. I like the bases to be in the same theme and look related and similar, but not exactly the same, not identical. So the trick that I found with these things is that you can just spice up the bases a little bit to add a little bit of variety and keep the same theme and the common flavor throughout your sectorial, but make sure that none of the bases are exactly the same. One way that you could do this would be to just paint them up in different colors. The bases that I'm using, the Alpha series, there are quite a few little panels and gubbins that are stuck around all over the place. So if you just varied up the color scheme a little bit, then that would add some variety in and of itself. But there's definitely quite a bit more that we can do there. One of my favorite tools to use when it comes to kit bashing and also base making is these little packs of styrene rods and plates and panels and beams and all kinds of stuff that you can find at like craft stores and hobby stores and things like that. These look really good because you can kind of just cut these up into pieces and then just stick them wherever you want on these bases to make them look like access panels or conduits, little bits of piping, or all sorts of other cool stuff. You can get these in a rod shape and you can cut those and stick them up vertically coming out of the base so that it looks like some sort of exhaust pipe. You can use the flat bits to try to cover up some of the details on the bases so that you don't see the sort of repetition of the same little unique detail. And you can use these I-beam bits to just look like a cool, weird bit of sci-fi tech, or you can cut off a teeny section and stick some wires under it and it looks like a conduit where wires are coming up out of the floor. You can even just put some of the cylindrical bits along some of the already sculpted in details on these bases just to make it look like a conduit or some piping that's laying along the floor. It breaks up the pre-existing detail quite a bit, and then you can paint these up in a variety of different colors to make them look cool and stand out or blend right in. You can also take a little bit of scrap wire that you might have laying around, and especially if it's like an old phone charger or something like that, if you cut the wire, you're actually going to notice there's a bunch of little wires in between that are individually wrapped. That can look pretty cool on a miniature base. It can look like a giant conduit that's broken or being constructed that has a bunch of little wires sticking out of it. Or you can just use a piece of chain or a single strand of wire to make it look like somebody's running some power tools or doing something along those lines. And you can mix and match these with some of the other bits to add even more variety. Now, some other cool stuff that you can do to add to these bases. I really, really love these sheets of diamond plate. I don't know if I've ever seen these available in a store, but you can definitely pick them up on the internet certain places. And these are really cool because you can just kind of stick them anywhere, and it kind of works like hazard stripes where you can just stick some diamond plate somewhere and it makes it look more industrial, more rugged, more used and worn. You can also just use some flat styrene sheets. I like to use the 1 or the 2 mil thick ones, but these come in a variety of different sizes, and you can cut these up into all different shapes and stick them in different places. One cool trick is that you can drill little holes into the edges of it so that it looks like it's a big metal panel that was bolted down to the floor. Maybe it was used to patch up a damaged section of the mothership. If you're enjoying this video and you want to support the channel, then there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. The first would be to pick up some merchandise through my merch store. You can grab a t-shirt, a hoodie, a mug, a sticker, all sorts of cool stuff like that. You can also shop using my affiliate links, so if you're going to make any purchases from any of these companies, you can use the links in the description below to make your purchases, and it will go directly to supporting the channel at no extra cost to you. There's also a link for my Ko-fi if you would just like to give me a tip, or my Patreon if you want to support me longer term. I have a bunch of different tiers there, and there are all sorts of benefits available to people, such as early access to videos, ad-free videos, the opportunity to vote in polls about upcoming content, and extra entries into the giveaways that I run occasionally. But if none of that is your cup of tea, no problem at all. Just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and leave a like on the video. It actually helps a tremendous amount. And if you want to go the extra mile, then consider sharing the video out with some friends who you think might find it interesting. The YouTube algorithm is not kind to small YouTubers, so that helps a whole bunch. Other than that, consider joining the Discord, also linked in the description, where you can come and hang out with me and the rest of the community and talk games. But with that, let's get right back to the video. Another one that I get a little bit less use out of for infinity bases, but it still finds its way in there, is these sheets. Some people call these granny grading. I think they are properly known as knitting mesh. But this is basically just a flexible plastic grid sheet, and these can look like some interesting metal fencing or pieces of detritus in a more traditional base. But for something like infinity, I find that it looks pretty good as like a walkway or a little discarded piece of metal if you cut them up into little strips. Another interesting one is these pieces of corrugated paper, and when you paint these up with some metallic paint, they look pretty convincing as corrugated metal. Now, that's typically the type of thing you see used as like the roof of a hut in a shanty town, but again, depending on what you're going for with your bases here, they may look like some discarded pieces of metal or something that was sort of cobbled together to patch up a section of the ship. It's not too far away from the whole theme of Corregidor, so I think it could definitely find its way into these bases somewhere. So what I like to do is just vary it up a little bit and cover different parts of the bases with different bits here to add quite a bit of variety without actually taking away from the whole base. Some of them I cover up a little bit more than others to get even more variety, but for some of them you can just stick one or two little pieces on and call it a day. Now for some of these bases I also went in and added some 3D printed bits that I had laying around. But with a lot of those, I also added in some of the plastic card details that I've shown on some of the other bases. And I think it all came together pretty nicely. Once these get painted up, even if you put them next to the identical base, you will definitely see that it adds enough variety that from 3 feet away on the tabletop, it's not going to look weird or unusual. Another thing you can do is just cut off pieces of the pre-molded base and then add to them separately. So in particular, some of the bases that have a little bit more vertical texture to them, you can just lop some pieces off and add something of your own. In a few cases, I've even built up something that looks like a little walkway, and I think it works really well with the theme, but it is quite a bit of work, so definitely be aware of that if you're going to go down that route. As with a lot of hobby projects, you don't really see the vision until you prime these bad boys up and then start getting some paint down on them, and it's always really satisfying to see things come together because they do clash when they're just sitting there on the gray bases. As I said, these are for my Corregidor sectorial, so I paint mine up in a couple of different red tones with some metallics in there. I like to do some heavy washing to make it look like a workspace, something that's definitely used and abused. A little bit of grime everywhere does a lot of good. And then the thing that I think really sells these as a ship base is adding some little scratches. You can just take a lighter color, like your highlight color that you maybe did some edge highlighting with, or you can just take like a white or an off-white and just add a couple of little hashes here and there. The thinner the line, the better, to make it look like a scuff mark or somewhere that somebody dropped something heavy on the floor and put a little dent in there. If the floors are all perfectly smooth and perfectly one color, I think that makes it look a little bit less lived in, and I definitely get the sense, especially when you're talking Corregidor, but across most of the Infinity universe, that things don't look perfect and pristine. I think when it comes to Infinity, at least for the aesthetic, we lean a little bit more Star Wars and a little less Star Trek, if you get my meaning. And that's pretty much that. This is a really fun way to just spice your bases up, and it really doesn't take a lot of work. If you have these materials laying around, if you've been making bases for other games or other sectorials, you can just slap some of this stuff on there and add quite a bit of variety, and it's kind of just an afternoon of playing around a little bit and gluing pieces on. I would imagine this is a little bit like what it felt like to work for Industrial Light and Magic back when they were working on the original Star Wars movies, where they were just kit bashing pieces of different parts together to make spaceships and adding gubbins and all kinds of cool stuff, and it's a ton of fun. And honestly, I think it adds a lot to the sectorial because, again, you don't want to see just the same 5 bases repeated over and over again. You want this to feel like people that are living on a big old spaceship, and there's all sorts of different stuff going on, and every room looks a little different. I bet you could do some similar stuff with a lot of the other styles of bases that Corvus Belli has put out. I know they have ones that look like street corners, and they have ones that look like sort of natural terrain on alien planets, but if you've ever done anything to spice any of those up, then get down in the comments below and let us know what you did. I've been working on my Corregidor Sectorial because I'm playing in a slow grow league in my local area, and I've been collecting Corregidor for a little while, but I have never had a chance to play them before, so this is the time for me to get all my stuff painted and ready. I'm really happy with how they've been coming out, and I'm glad I decided to go with these pre-made bases because this would have been a ton of work if I was just making all these bases from scratch. The other cool thing about the Corvus Belli bases is they're not very expensive, and I have had a couple of quality control issues with them here and there, but nothing too major. And most of the time it's easy enough to just clean up the bits that are a little bit messy, and that might be a good candidate for one that you're going to add some bits on top of to hide some of the damage. In case you missed it, don't forget to check out the battle report that I posted last week for the new Next Wave Sectorial. It's really cool, and it was a ton of fun playing that game. And keep an eye out because we will have more coming very soon. With that, I want to send a huge thank you to the extremely cool kids tier on Patreon, Steam Proud Scoundrels, Rob Younce, Tom Likely, and Russets. And thanks for watching.